Shalom and welcome to On the House, the podcast where industry experts and professionals discuss real estate in Israel. I'm your host, Debbie Goldfisher, real estate agent, founder and editor-in-chief of buyitinisrael.com. Join us as we explore market trends, legal and tax issues, purchasing tips, neighborhoods throughout Israel, and much more. All this is On the House, helping you make the right move. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the fourth episode of the fifth season of On the House. Today's topic is one of the most important yet overlooked aspects of purchasing real estate in Israel, and that is the role of a land appraiser, or a shamaim, in assessing the value and legitimacy of a property. When buying a home in Israel, there are several critical reasons to bring in a professional appraiser. First and foremost, you want to ensure you're paying the right price and not overpaying. A proper valuation gives you a clear understanding of the property's true worth. Secondly, it's crucial to confirm that what you're buying is legally registered, built according to permits, and complies with zoning regulations. And beyond that, you'll want to understand the property's potential, whether for future development, resale, or expansion. And if you're taking a mortgage, it's non-negotiable. The bank will almost always require a professional appraisal to ensure they're not lending more than the property is worth, protecting their investment in case, God forbid, there's a default. On a personal note, this topic is close to my heart. About 13 years ago, I returned to school to pursue my MBA at the University of Haifa, focusing on real estate appraisal and management. This was a natural extension of my background and my passion for real estate. After completing my MBA, I did a 12-month apprenticeship or a stage and then continued to work for several years at a firm in Tel Aviv. Those years were invaluable. I learned an incredible amount about real estate that goes far beyond the knowledge of real estate agents, engineers, or architects. I've come to believe that shamaim are the true experts in real estate, with their ability to analyze a property, break it down, and truly understand its intrinsic value. It's worth noting how challenging it is to qualify as a shamaim in Israel. The process involves passing 13 rigorous high-level exams, with the final stages being incredibly demanding. Finding an English-speaking shamaim who has not only passed these exams but also understands the unique needs of international buyers is rare. And that's why I'm thrilled and honest to welcome today's guest to our show, Amichai Lewis. Amichai is a certified real estate appraiser who has been practicing since 2018. He specializes in a wide range of appraisals, including valuations for betterment levies, hetel hashbacha, for Tekken 19, which is for banks and insurance companies who are lending money to finance a property purchase, and for Section 197 claims, which assess compensation for expropriation or other governmental actions that affect property rights. Amichai's experience spans everything from rental estimations to providing counter-assessments for local committees. He is skilled at navigating the complexities of Israeli real estate law and representing clients in deliberations before arbitrating appraisers. Known for his meticulous attention to detail, Amichai is committed to helping clients make informed decisions, ensuring every appraisal is conducted to the highest professional standards. His deep understanding of Israeli real estate, coupled with his dedication to excellence, makes him a trusted resource for property owners, investors, and developers alike. Amichai, thank you for joining us today and welcome to On the House.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. First of all, Amichai, I hear you have an English accent. Tell us a little bit about where were you born and when did you get here?
So I was born in Israel. My parents made Aliyah, got married here.
Lucky you.
They're both from London originally. I grew up in Bet Shemesh, so English in the neighborhood.
An English at heart.
Not really.
Not really. Well, it's very unusual, as I said, to find an English-speaking shamaim in Israel. Could you tell us, how did you get into this field?
When I finished my army service, I signed up to study economics in Ariel University. I met friends there and we knew there were options you could start learning in your second year in university. And one of them was real estate appraisals. It interested me, so I went to that field.
Fantastic.
It was long, it was tough, but I'm enjoying it today.
Unbelievable. Kol hakavod. Any regrets?
No.
That's great. Okay, so let's dive right in, Amichai. Could you tell us a little bit about the role of an appraiser when purchasing a private residential property?
When you buy an apartment, for example, or a private house, beyond the price where we'll say 5 million shekels, the cost of the apartment or the value, to get to the value, you need to check a whole lot of different aspects on the way. If it's the legal rights, if it's building rights, if it's the building permits, is the house built illegally, anyone added on? Is it an apartment even? those are questions that lead us to the real value at the end. So when you do an appraisal in advance, you know what you're buying and what the value is.
Mm-hmm. So somebody who wants to buy a house, they bring you in to make sure that the price that they're paying corresponds to the value of the property.
It divides into two. If you go to a bank when you buy an apartment, when you take a loan, you have to have an appraisal done. There's an appraisal before or after the contract. After the contract is, you've signed your contract, that's the price. If the shamaim goes for higher or lower, it happens, you can go for higher, but the bank will go for the safe side, meaning if I give the apartment's value to be 5 million and you paid 4.5 million, then the bank will take the loan
lower
from 4.5 million.
Mm-hmm. 1 second, just let's backtrack for a minute. Why is it so important to the bank to do an appraisal?
The bank want to be safe. On the safe side, loaning money is a risk for the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And the bank wants to keep themselves protected if something happens.
They want to make sure that they're not lending more than the property's worth. Understood. So if you've already bought the property and you've signed at 5 million shekels and they come in with an evaluation at 4.5, what happens?
So the client has a problem because the bank will give him according to the 4.5 million shekels, not to the 5.
He's going to have to come up with that other 500,000 on his own.
500,000 from his home, or have to bring them from a loan that's not a mortgage, which always comes with higher interest rates, and he'll have to pay more money back over the years.
Mm-hmm. So very importantly, before you sign a contract, make sure you have an appraisal so that you can get the loan that you're expecting to make the purchase.
I always recommend you take an appraisal. It's very simple. If you'd be buying a car today, a second-hand car for 50, 60 or 70,000 shekels, most people would go to the garage and have the car checked to make sure they're paying the right, or there's nothing surprising them on the way. So when you buy a piece of land or an apartment, which is a few million shekels, why not insure yourself for a low cost and be calm you're buying something real?
Absolutely. Right. Okay, so let's go back to your role. As you said, if you're looking for a mortgage, then obviously the appraisal is very, very important, and that must be done before you make the purchase. What are the investigations that you do in order to get to the value of the property?
So in order to make an appraisal, we have to go and see the apartment or the home. We have to visit and see the whole property.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only the easy bit of the appraisal itself. As I said earlier on, after we've been to the property, we check anything to do with the legal rights, if how the apartment's registered, where it's registered, is it ownership or is it lease? Who lives in the apartment? Is he living there legally? Does he have a legal lease contract, or is he the owner who lives there?
Because you might buy an apartment and then you end up dealing with a tenant that you can't get rid of.
Exactly. And then you've bought an apartment, but you're stuck. We check the building rights, meaning is there any potential that might exist? Are there any extra building rights when you can expand your house legally now? Or we check the building permit to check the house is built according to the permit. Or if anything's been changed, if you've taken the machsan and changed it into a bedroom.
Right, which is not uncommon.
It's very common. For the bank, for example, I can't assess that room as a room. It has to be assessed as a machsan. Not only will it be assessed as a machsan, which is valued less than a regular bedroom, I also have to take in account for a bank costs in order to return to being a machsan. Meaning,
so you have to deduct from the value in order to allow
the value
for the
in order for
conversion.
it to, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so we're looking at the legal rights and the potential of the property.
We also look at the condition of the house, meaning is it an old wreck or does it look good with high-end finishes and, a vacuum cleaners and fancy windows or things like that?
Meaning you could have two identical houses built next to each other, even attached to each other.
Completely different.
One can be completely renovated, one can be old, and they'll have totally different values.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Any other aspects of the property that we're looking at?
Overall, it sounds easy, it sounds short, but we check, for example, another example come up, an Israeli invention of 4.5 bedrooms. There isn't such a thing as a half a bedroom. The law in Israel calls it a cheder or chadron. Chadron is the half bedroom we all know, which has to be an X amount of distance between two walls and the area has to be lower or higher than, but that's things that more naturally when we walk into the home, we're used to seeing the differences in the distances and we can identify things even before looking at plans.
And sometimes the property may be marketed in a certain way, like 4 rooms, but when you get there, it's actually 3.5.
Right.
Makes a big difference.
Or it can also be marketed as 150 square meters on the Arnona. Each city has different ways of measuring Arnona as well. But then it might be 120 square meters apartment. So that 30 meters is a major difference in the value.
Major difference, sure. You touched a few minutes ago on the potential. Explain to us what you mean by that.
Potential is also, it's a wide topic. It varies from the potential of pinui binui, meaning taking old complexes with the developer coming in and he demolishes the existing buildings.
Under urban renewal programs.
And he builds new towers and the owners from the old buildings get a new apartment and the developer sells on whatever he's got left.
So if a building that you're assessing is zoned for Pinoi Binoi, that would add significant value to the property?
To the market value, not to the value I'd be taking for the bank, because the bank doesn't take potential in account.
So very importantly is when you're doing the shamaut, when you're doing the appraisal, you want to ask what the purpose of the appraisal is. If it's for the purpose of the bank, that's one thing. But if the buyer wants to know the value, including the potential, that's something else.
Right.
So you look at like potential for urban renewal. What else are we looking at?
Another potential that exists is a new taba.
City plans.
A city plan's been approved earlier on, or a year ago, 2 years ago. And it says each house on the street can add 20 square meters to the house. That's also potential that some people wouldn't know about. It's worth a lot of money.
Absolutely. Okay. And another important aspect that I know you look at are comparables. Isgot hashva. You're looking at comparable properties in the area. So how do you do that?
Like everyone else can do, basically, we go into Mas Shevach Rashut HaMisim's website and we see deals that have been sealed there. And then we start investigating them as well. So you can't rely on the report because each lawyer reports it differently. So we go and we check the building permits, or if it was registered in Batim Meshutafim, then we check the Batim Meshutafim's areas. It all depends on how we take our apartment to be compared with others.
So this is an important point. I know that many people say, I don't need to bring in a shamai. I can look on the Madlan website, for example. Madlan is an Israeli website, and they show apartments that are for sale and they show comparables that were sold. The problem is that, as Amichai said, they're extracting this information from the tax authority's website, and it's sort of two-dimensional. There's no third dimension. You don't really know what they're referring to. You're not comparing apples to apples, and it's very risky to base a valuation on this. You have to really, as Amichai said, delve into each and every relevant property and understand what exactly is the property about, and is it a true comparison.
Today, or Yad Shtaim, they have a calculator where you can put information in about your home and it'll give you a range of the value of that house. I did an appraisal for someone in Netanya. It was an apartment they inherited. They wanted to sell. We did the appraisal and if I remember correctly, it was about 1.35 million shekels. And the client came back to me and says, doesn't make sense. I checked on the Yad Shtaim calculator and it was 1.5 to 1.7. So then I explained to him that the difference between the calculator to what we did, and then he understood. A few months later, he updated me that he actually sold exactly according to our appraisal.
Good for you. Right. So far, what you're saying is you're doing the legal checks, which really a lawyer does as well. You're looking at the planning permissions and the permits and the zoning, which the architect that they bring in could also do. People bring in an architect to see the potential of the property, if they could make, certain changes. And the comparables, you said, you're quite rightly, you can't really do that yourself, but many agents think that they can do it, and people say, I can ask my agent. They can tell me the comparables. Why would you say it's really important to bring in an appraiser? Like, what can you do that nobody else is doing?
As I said earlier, first of all, it's insurance. You know what you're buying. After you've done an appraisal, you know what the product you've got is and you're going to be owning. Second of all, real estate appraiser in Israel is the only professional person who can give you a value to the property. Everyone else can say
whatever
X,
they want.
Y, Z.
Right.
But the bottom line, after it's been checked completely by the appraiser, is that. No one else can give you the figure legally.
And there are very high standards, ethical, moral standards in this profession that you can't deviate from. So you know that when you have an appraiser's report, that appraisal is worth a lot. But I must remind everyone, an appraisal, I told you I studied shamaim and I worked in the field. And on day one, the guy who was training me said something very important. He said an appraisal, by definition, is an estimate. There's no black and white. There's no absolute definite value on any property. It's not math. You can ask 3 different appraisers for valuation, and each one will go about it in a very professional way and come back with a different figure. However, those 3 figures will be within a certain range. And you have to understand that when you're getting an appraisal, it's a valuation based on an opinion. Usually appraisers work with other appraisers and they consult with colleagues in order to ensure that they're thinking correctly and that they're coming up with the right valuation. But again, it's very important to remember this is not black and white. It's not 1 + 1. It's professional opinion. But these opinions can be upheld in court. And they're used throughout all transactions, in particular very large ones. And they're used for the pricing of apartments and for mortgages, as we spoke about, and lending. It's very, very, very important profession, which I don't believe there is overseas, right? I mean, in other countries, do they have this sort of profession?
Every country has it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Our profession in Israel is specific for Israel. We're trained differently. The laws are completely different.
Right. From the UK, for example, a lot of people have a surveying degree, but that doesn't translate into an appraisal. They can't convert it like a dentist or a doctor.
You can't convert. Anyone who'd come to Israel with relevant background, a professional from abroad, when he'd come to Israel, he'd have to
retrain from scratch
completely, unless some of the exams he might be able to get exemptions because for example, he did a degree in economics. So some of the economic courses and exams he'd have to do on the way, he might be able to not have to do them.
Right, but he wouldn't get the professional qualification. Right. And likewise, if you were to move overseas, not that you're going anywhere, there's nowhere to go today, right? Nowhere to go, you're in the right place. But if an Israeli shamaim went overseas, his profession is not transferable.
No.
Okay, so stay right here. Okay.
No plans to go anywhere.
Absolutely, nowhere to go. So, as we know, very often you'll do an appraisal and the number doesn't quite match up to the asking price of the property. Why would that be?
First of all, you might say your home is worth 2 million shekels. You're allowed to. It's yours. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean the market see it the same way as you do. Mm-hmm. Second thing that can affect it, if we're talking about an apartment, it might not be a legal apartment, meaning it might be a machsan on the ground floor or parking spaces that were closed up and converted to be an apartment. Mm-hmm. And then you might be buying car parks or a machsan and not a home. I've actually had that in Tel Aviv once. Mm-hmm. And luckily the client had us before the deal was done. He stepped back and of course he didn't continue with the deal.
Sure.
Because he wasn't buying an apartment for 4 million shekels. He was buying a machsan and a few parking spaces.
Terrible. And the agent didn't tell him this?
Of course not. The agent probably didn't know himself, but he saw his potential. Mm-hmm. And was trying to do it.
Right. You're right about the illegal space can sometimes make the asking price higher than the value, the intrinsic value. So I know on my street, for example, some people had built illegal basements without getting permits. Now they can actually get the permits. And people were willing to pay for that because they'd already dug out the basement. They wouldn't get the mortgage on that part of the house, but it did add to the purchase price of the house and they were willing to pay for it. So I guess at the end of the day, it comes down to how much somebody is willing to pay for the product. That's really what it comes down to.
That's market value.
Right. Have you ever had situations where after your valuation came in lower than the asking price, the seller put the price down in order to sell?
The Israelis all work with negotiating. Seller thinks he's doing you a favor when he goes down a bit. That's why he starts from higher. The buyer thinks he's doing a good deal because, he's brought the seller down. Mm-hmm. Instead of starting from X, they all start from X plus 10% and end up at the X. So it works like that.
It works like that.
But I actually had a case in Jerusalem a few years ago that someone bought an apartment. We walked into the apartment and we said, it's not an apartment. And we investigated later on and it was registered in the Iriya as a well. It was in the old areas of Jerusalem.
Oh my goodness.
And he was lucky because we came after the contract. But his lawyer put a clause in the agreement saying that if there was any problems with the register of the apartment, he could cancel the deal. We ended up going to court. He took us to represent him in court. and we managed to cancel that deal. And he was lucky. He learned his lesson, and he took us for 3 more appraisals until he bought his home.
Worthwhile.
Yes, we saved him a lot of money.
I'm sure. That's really quite unbelievable. By the way, do you have to do an appraisal on a new apartment, would you say?
It's a trick if what stage the project is when you buy it from the developer.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you buy a new home and you have to take the mortgage from the bank, the developer has his loan in, then the bank won't need an appraisal because they know the project.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to another bank or you go in a later stage of the building, then you will have to have an appraisal.
I see. But if you're buying a second-hand property, a pre-owned home, as we call it, but it's a newer home, it's not like anything like a well or a prehistoric kind of property, do these sorts of issues come up? I mean, I would imagine it's more straightforward.
Always things. Someone expanded his window illegally. You're not allowed to make any changes on the outskirts of the house.
The external side. Mm-hmm.
Right. So someone's made his window bigger or moved his front door. Inside, you can renovate and change a 5-room apartment to 4 bedrooms and it's okay. But you have to check how it was done. If they did that and they ruined the mamad, your safe room, then it affects the value.
Sure. So you take the original plans and you compare them to the actual property.
Right.
Which is why you have to be there yourself to see it.
To be there, we take photos, we video it as well, because you don't sit down straight away and do your appraisal. It takes a few days sometimes to get to it. So you've got it fresh in front of you.
Sure.
And also proof that you were really there and saw everything.
Okay. So you do the appraisal. How long would you say that takes usually?
I try and produce the appraisal to my clients within 10 working days.
No, sorry. How long is the visit?
The visit depends on the apartment or the home. If it's something simple and standard, it can take 5 to 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The long ones can take 15 to 20 minutes because we've found problems or things that don't sit together with the plans we came with. Mm-hmm. It varies, but normally within 10 minutes, we see what we needed to see on site.
Mm-hmm. So before you go to the property, you've already extracted the plans.
Right.
And what else?
We extract the plans and basic information we need before we go. Mm-hmm. And we learn while we're there.
That's great.
We learn on the area as well. It's not only I come and see the apartment, I come and see the street next to it, the neighborhood sometimes.
Sure.
I look at for sale signs. Sometimes I phone the agent to get more information.
It's all about due diligence.
Yeah.
So, okay. So once you've seen the property, you then go back to the office and what do?
Upload the photos to the computer. That's the most important thing. You don't want to lose that.
Although I would think at this day and age, they're already uploaded. The second you take them, they should be there.
Not always.
Okay.
We start collecting any relevant information. I tell clients, send any information you've got. I'll deal with all the paperwork. The more, the better. Inheritance,
wills,
registration. Anything that you think that might be relevant.
Purchase contracts, everything.
Anything.
Okay.
If it's not relevant, I'll put it on the side. But anything relevant, it's always good.
Okay.
So we collect all the legal information. We look in the building permits. If we need, we go to the area. We get the relevant documents. If there's shimur, preservation, then we speak to the relevant people, what needs to be preserved and why or how it affects the value. As I said earlier on, we build up a whole story of this property in order to get to the bottom line, what interests everybody, the value. But most clients won't read the appraisal, which can be 15 to 20 pages long with photos and maps and lots of relevant information. They'll straight away go to the last page and start complaining.
Show me the money.
Exactly. And they'll say, why only 4 and not 5 million? Then you'll say, if you read through, you'll understand.
So you build up, as you said, a whole story on this property based on all the different aspects you described, the location, the street, the condition, the size, the legal aspects, the permits, the planning, the zoning, the potential, the comparables, and then you come to the valuation.
Bottom line.
And that's the bottom line that they want to see. You produce this in English or in Hebrew?
In Hebrew.
Okay.
Our appraisals are in Hebrew.
All they want is the number at the end. So
exactly.
They
you can read that in any language.
Right. Provide a summary in English if somebody wants
We can do summaries in English if someone wants. If someone wants to speak afterwards or meet afterwards, we can do that as well.
Well, you speak English. That's amazing. I mean, most appraisers here do not speak English.
And they don't even speak Hebrew, but that's a different problem. They yell.
But it's amazing that you can communicate with people and explain to them how you got to this. Very, very good.
We can also translate, but that is extra costs. And overall, it's not something I'd recommend.
It's not worth it.
Unless you need the appraisal to produce it to the tax authorities in the US or in the UK, then I understand. But otherwise, a summary is more than enough. But even the Hebrew with a short explanation should be enough.
Right. I'm interested to know if you use AI in this work.
It's starting, but AI is a tricky question because in the end, as I said before, we have to go and visit the property. There's nothing that can change what we see in the apartment.
You need the human touch.
Right.
Right. What I find with AI, I mean, it's amazing. It's not that it's replacing the work that we do, it's enhancing. And we have to know how to use it in order to benefit from it at its best. Have you ever had a case where you came in too low, the client wasn't happy, and he convinced you to increase the value?
I always tell my clients, if that happens, that I might have made a mistake.
You're a human being.
If they send me or show me relevant information that I might have missed, I'll always go over it. I'll check it. And if I made a mistake, I'll correct myself.
That's great. So another hat that I wear, I haven't ever shared this publicly, but I actually do graphic design as well. It's one of my little hobbies. And a few years ago, I took a course with a wonderful Haredi woman in Yerushalayim, and we actually became friends. And not so long ago, she contacted me and said that her and her husband are buying a property in a building that's going through urban renewal, and they need to take a sizable mortgage, and the appraisal came in too low. And she said, I know that you studied appraisal. Can you help me? So I said, well, look, I'm happy to talk to the appraiser, but, I can't make him change his mind. And ethically, legally, he's not allowed to, but I'm happy to talk to him. And she said, what you have to explain to him is that we live in an area that is very, very popular with Haredim, in particular Anglo Haredim. It's very high demand. And there are not many garden apartments. This is a garden apartment, and a whole long thing. I ended up speaking to him, and he actually changed the value. He went up by about 300,000 shekels, which for them meant they could get the mortgage. I mean, to this day, she's forever grateful to me, but that's not the point. It's that he obviously didn't know the neighborhood well enough to understand the demand and the potential. So I guess sometimes the shamaim can up the appraisal, and it did fly by the bank, and they did accept it, which was good.
It's always good to listen and to be open to changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people ask me when they get the price of an apartment that I might be marketing or selling, they ask me, what's the value that's attached to the balcony? So they work out what the price per square meter is, but the meterage of the balcony is not the same value as the meterage, let's say, of the living rooms or of the bedrooms. So how do you work that out? What value do you
We call it equivalenti in Hebrew, which is from the word equivalent in English, of course, where we give percentages. For example, a garden can be 25% from a built square meter of the living room. When we compare our apartment to other deals that were done, then we have to, of course, keep the same equivalent rate for each aspect. And altogether, that will give us not the value of a square meter, but of the equivalent square meter.
So if you have an identical apartment, one has a garden of 50 square meters and the other has 150 square meters, you use the same formula to work out the value of the garden.
Yes and no. And I'll explain. Yes, because if all the gardens were 50 meters and one garden was 100%, then 100 meters, then each one of the gardens will be, the first 50 meters will be 25%. And the extra 50 meters for that one garden that has 100 square meters would be a lower rate because, lost the term, the marginal difference. The more you have, the less it's worth.
Okay. That's interesting because I would actually think the opposite. I would think that here you have a unique apartment. All the gardens are 50 square meters, and now you have one that's 100 square meters. So actually that difference should be worth more than the others.
So I agree. Maybe the example of 50 square meters and 100 square meters wasn't the best example.
Okay.
But we see that, for example, when you're talking about 350 or 500 square meters of a garden.
I see. So you're looking on a case-by-case basis.
Right. Each case is different. But again, the bottom line is when we work with equivalent percentages, then it doesn't matter what equivalent percentage we'll put, as long as we keep consistent with it on that specific appraisal, the bottom line will bring us to the same number.
Very interesting. Talking about garden apartments, a lot of people don't understand when I tell them the price of the garden apartment is a lot more than the price of the second or third or fourth floor apartment. Might be the same exact apartment, but it has a garden instead of a balcony. Why are garden apartments worth so much more?
First of all, because of the garden. It gives you more living space. You don't live in the garden, but having a garden means you have more space.
Sure.
Especially over COVID days when everyone was at home, suddenly the need for an extra bedroom or the bigger balcony or the garden became
even greater. Right. Similarly, penthouses as well. They're like, I always say that the garden.
It's a different item
right.
If you go into the supermarket, it's a completely different item.
Right.
But it's also more unique than a regular apartment, and its value is, the balcony there is worth a lot more, of course.
Sure. I always call the garden apartments and the penthouses are premium apartments, and the others are generally standard apartments. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, every floor as we go up, generally value increases.
Not exactly like that.
Okay.
Developers, when they sell apartments, for example, we have now a case in Tirata Carmel. Someone bought an apartment, the same exact apartment, on the 5th, on the 6th, and on the 9th floor. Each floor was being sold by the developer for 10,000 shekels more than the floor underneath.
Okay.
But it's not accurate because there's no difference between the view on the 5th floor to the 6th floor.
Well, so what's he charging more for?
Because he can.
So when it comes to selling those properties,
probably be sold for the same price.
Interesting. So that's important to know, that if somebody's buying an investment property, it's not worth buying on a significantly higher floor.
I think I'd say it depends where you're investing. Because if you're investing in a Haredi area, for example, and the building has 6 floors, but they don't have the Shabbat lift, and you don't use the lift on Shabbat, then
go for a lower floor.
The 5th floor or the 3rd floor, I prefer the 3rd floor.
Right. But if you're buying in a tower in Netanya, that's 22 floors, and you're deliberating between the 5th or the 8th floor, and it's a difference of 30,000, 40,000 shekels.
You might have a difference there because you might have the view of the sea. You might not. See. Again, you
have to look on a case-by-case basis.
Is completely different. So you have to be careful.
Absolutely. So we can hear why it's really worth consulting with a shamai before making any kind of purchase, even if it's a new property. We've explained the importance of bringing in an appraiser. Tell us, Amichai, how should buyers go about selecting an appraiser? Are there specific qualifications or experience that they should be looking for?
First of all, licensed appraisers are a must. You can't go to anyone who looks like, sounds like, or wants to be, because they're not allowed to give you the value, even though they might give you a number. They're not allowed to.
Okay.
So if you want to be careful and be on the safe side, go for a certified appraiser, of course.
How do you know if they're certified? I mean, obviously you ask them, but if
you ask them, but someone who isn't certified won't tell you he is. He'd go around and say, I'm a broker or I'm a agent,
right?
But he won't say, I'm a real estate appraiser.
Okay.
And then it depends what the need of the appraisal is. If you want to buy an apartment specifically in Be'er Sheva, then you'd probably be better off going to a appraiser who knows Be'er Sheva. If you're looking for something more wide, I want to invest in Ra'anana Natanya area, then you'd go for someone who might know those areas better.
Local guys.
Right. Not every firm, for example, a firm that is located in Tel Aviv, doesn't mean they only know Tel Aviv.
Sure.
You work in wider areas. So it's always worth going to someone who knows the area or has the ability of learning it better.
So just because you have a friend, neighbor, relative who's an appraiser doesn't mean that he or she is the right person for the area that you're particularly interested in.
Right.
Where do you work, Amichai?
I work for a firm in Petach Tikva, and I also practice by myself.
Which areas are your specialty?
In the office I work for, we work, depends on what the purpose of the work is. If it's Hetel Hashbacha, we work basically around the country, or Pinui Binui. For banks, we know the whole Merkaz area. Tel Aviv, Ra'anana, Natanya, Petach Tikva, Kfar Saba, Jerusalem area, Bet Shemesh, Modi'in.
Okay, great.
We cover a lot of the areas.
What can you tell us in general about the market in Israel?
A hot market, interesting days ahead of us. The interest rate, again today, hasn't changed. I think for the 7th time in a row.
4.5%.
Yep. Which means it's challenging on the one hand to buy here. On the other hand, it's an opportunity.
Why is it an opportunity?
I reckon that it's been quite quiet for the last few months because of the war. But I think it's a matter of time until the market is going to explode in a positive way with properties.
A lot of people are on the edge. They haven't been buying, but they're still
But they're
interested.
waiting for the right moment.
They're waiting.
And I think the moment is getting closer. And potential-wise, I think Ashkelon, Ashdod, Kiryat Malachi, down south or Naharia.
Basically, the areas that we don't want to go to right now are the ones with the most potential.
In my opinion, they're the most potential because if you're looking to invest, for sure, because the prices there are quite low and there will be new projects coming through because things were ruined and it's the natural developing of any building areas. So,
and we are a nation that builds and rebuilds.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing. Very interesting. You've been in this business since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So if we were to draw a graph, plot the points of like the average prices of real estate in the country since 2018, what would you say that graph looks like?
Gone up.
Just up?
Gone up. Depends on the areas. Some areas have gone up 5 to 10%. Some areas have gone up 25 to 30%. And some places even have made mark the 40%.
From 2018?
Yes.
Unbelievable. I live in Modi'in. I'd say in the last 6 years, even more, some places more than 50% have gone up.
So Modi'in throughout COVID did crazy amounts of percentages. It has calmed down. I'm not saying it stopped, or there was some point that we thought it was going down, but I think it's equaled through already, stabilized, and it's interesting. It's interesting days ahead of us.
Absolutely. We never really touched upon rental yields. When somebody is making an investment, is this something you look at as well? Like how much are the yields?
We can. Normally it's done when you go to the bank as an investor and you want to take a loan and you tell the bank, I'm not going to live there. It's for an investment. So the bank will want to know how much money you'll be making a month from the lease.
Right. Okay. What would you say in general about rental prices?
Depends where, like everything.
Like sale prices, have they gone up? Or
yes, everything's gone up.
In particular because people are not buying, so the rents have gone up.
Yep.
And also with a lot of people making aliyah, foreigners looking to rent but not ready to buy, those prices have gone up.
It's demand and supply. They're not building enough in Israel. More new couples getting married, new olim chadashim, and there's not enough homes. So it's a one-way game at the moment.
Absolutely. Amichai, this has been super helpful. Great insights. As I said, I think a lot of people don't really understand what this profession is about and what you do. And I think you've done a great job at explaining that. Before we end, Amichai, tell us a little bit about where you live and why you chose to live there.
I live in Givot Eden.
Ah, okay. That's a first for our podcast. Givot Eden is, as we also know, Eden Hills.
Yes, the famous Eden Hills.
The famous Eden Hills.
The previous developer failed for close to 30 years to develop.
He promised like a gated city with like...
Eden Hills is because Beverly Hills in Israel.
Right.
Promised big plots of land with big houses. Never happened. 2014, he did a combination deal with a developer and they developed a new yeshuv, started developing a new yeshuv, where the first phase included 270 homes in 3 phases, Shlav Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. So today, Shlav Aleph and Bet have already moved in. So we're about 160 homes already living there. And the first houses were passed on to the buyers right before the 7th of October last year. There were 5 families, I think, at the beginning of the war living there. And now we're already 160.
Unbelievable. Where in the country are you?
We're just outside Bet Shemesh, between Bet Shemesh and Gush Etzion.
Within the Green Line?
Within the Green Line.
And what's it like?
It's nice. It's quiet. It's not meant to, wasn't sold as a religious place. It was called the Yeshuv Me'orav.
Okay, a mixed
Yeshuv. The percentages of religious families are quite high and they vary all along the religious spectrum. There are non-religious families as well, but I'd say about 75% of the people living there these days are religious.
Beautiful. How long have you lived there for?
We moved in April, 7 months ago. Half of the time I was on Miluim. So
wow. Kol hakavod.
My wife was there by herself.
It's so hard. Kol hakavod.
And
what did you do in Miluim, if I may ask?
Like everyone else, we bounced around in the country. We did the first round of Miluim we started like everyone on the 7th of October. We were there for 2.5 months. We started off in the center of the country and then we moved down south. And on the second round, we were next to Shaveh Shomron.
In the Shomron.
Our third round, we just finished a couple of weeks ago, was in Gaza again.
So, kol hakavod. And on behalf of our listeners, I thank you for your service. Really, really appreciate it. And finally, Amichai, tell us if you were to move. I know you're not moving because you just moved to your new home, but if you were to move or to buy another home, where would you buy and why?
I'm not moving. I hope I'm not moving. Experience of building a house was enough for me
I'm sure
to do it once in a lifetime. But I looking for potential in new developing places or in the less attractive places today.
Mm-hmm.
When I say less attractive, I wouldn't go to Yerucham. Nothing personal against Yerucham. It's just that there's a lot of army bases nearby, and people thought a few years ago that if they bought there, lots of officers would, or people who work in the army would move and live there. But that didn't happen.
Hasn't happened.
I'd go to areas that were, we call it in Hebrew, Mukei Milchama. They were hit from the war. That's where I reckon are the recommended places.
Great. So we have on our website a bunch of projects in the south and in the north. And we actually have a project in Gvot Eden, where you live as well. So anybody that's interested, please take a look and fill out the forms and somebody will come back to you. Okay. Again, thank you so much, Amichai. We really appreciate your time and your service. And to all of our listeners, this brings us to the end of our 5th season. We're going to take a little break and we'll be back shortly with our next season. So stay tuned. In the meantime, we should only share good news and hear good news. And please God, peace and security to all of our residents, and the Chatofim should come home safe and sound. And all of our soldiers should be protected and do their holy work and come home safe and sound. Shalom aleichat. Thank you for listening to On the House. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with your family and friends. You can also visit buyitinisrael.com, where you can find news, market updates, guidance, and much more on real estate in Israel. That's Buy It in Israel, BUYIT in Israel.com. If you have a question or a specific topic you'd like us to cover on this podcast, please email us at the address you'll find at the bottom of the show notes. Whether you're thinking about Aliyah, looking for a home or a haven, or wanting to support the Israeli economy, now is the time to buy it in Israel.